Okay. So if you want to turn to the start of Act 4. Act 4 is back in Moore River. Remember, Joe has been arrested because he absconded with Mary. Okay? And now the first scene is at Sunday school. Okay? Have a look here, Sunday school. You all know what Sunday school is? So you go to like church for children. Okay? So it's children's church. Yes? So they're having church outside for children, and Sister Eileen is sitting in a group with Cece and Topsy. Sister Eileen is telling a story. She's actually telling the Christmas story, which is the story of how baby Jesus was born. Okay? And so she's telling the story and asking questions. Okay, Mary and Joseph and Jesus had 3 special visitors. Who were they? And Topsy says, the 3 wise men, Sister Eileen. Okay. And then Sister says, yes, very good, Topsy. And what did they bring? They brought gifts of gold, frankincense and myrrh, but on the way there were they spoke to the king of Judea. Who was the king of Judea? And Topsy's like, hands goes up. She's like, me, I know this. So Topsy is really keen to show her knowledge of the Christian faith, of the Christian religion. Does that make sense? Okay. So Topsy is a Christian. So she's become a Christian. She wants to please. Now, we know the word please when we say, please give me this, but please as a verb, do you know what that means, Jack Jung? If you want to please somebody, what does that mean? Yes, exactly. You want them to be happy. You want them to like you. So Topsy, the character of Topsy, she's wanting Sister Eileen and these white authority figures to like her. Okay? And there is a contrast in this scene between Topsy and Cece. Okay? So if you have a look, Topsy's hand is up. I know. But Cece, well, do you know Cece? No, sister. Okay? Cece doesn't know. And she's not interested. So I've got here, this little section here, I've written some notes and you might look at these, okay? So Topsy is trying to please. She's assimilating, and I've written the word there, assimilate, to the culture, okay? Assimilate. Can you see this writing here? Assimilate means become similar to. Assimilate. You can hear the word similar in assimilate. Yes? Okay. Assimilate means become the same as everybody else. And a lot of people here say, oh, people who come from other countries should assimilate to Australia. You're in Australia, you need to act like an Australian person acts. You shouldn't act differently. Okay, you need to assimilate. So Topsy is an example of an Aboriginal person who is assimilated to the culture. And an example of this is her taking on the Christian religion. Okay? Whereas Cece is an example of somebody who's not interested in this religion. She is not assimilating. Okay? So there's the contrast between these two characters that can be seen in this act. Okay? Cece then notices David, and he telling the story, grabs David and says, boy, where are you going? And David says, swimming. Then Billy starts to belt David with his whip. Okay, so Billy starts to use his whip to hit David on the legs. Okay, and Cece says, look, Sister Eileen, look at what Billy is doing. Billy thinks that he's right. He says, you're supposed to be in Sunday school. Good here, white people waiting for you. Topsy says, Billy's beating one of those boys. But Billy thinks that he's right. He's defending the white person. Get to Sunday school, get to Sunday school, get. Okay? Now, this is Cece. She picks up a stone. You know what a stone is? A rock. And she runs over. You know what she's going to do? She's going to protect her brother. She's going to throw that at Billy. Alright? Sister says, Cecilia, that's her full name. Wait. Cece says, you leave him alone, old man. Cece's ready to throw the stone. Okay? And I've written up 3 things here. This emphasises her spirit. Strong spirit. She's a rebel. She's not going to obey authority. She will stand up for what she believes in. She's strong. She's not weak. And I've written not submissive. She's not like a servant. She doesn't just obey what she's told. Yes, miss, yes, miss, yes, miss. She's a little like her Uncle Jimmy in spirit. She's been taught to stand up against injustice. Okay? So you might want to write some of those words down. Cece preparing to defend her brother with a stone emphasises her spirit, her rebellion. Her nature is not submissive. Do you know what this word submissive means? Submissive might be eager to please, wanting to make them happy, doing whatever is told. Yes, miss, whatever you say, miss, I'll do that, miss. Now, Topsy is presented as submissive. Yes, sister, whereas Cece is not submissive. Her character is more rebellious. Yes? Okay, does that make sense? Billy says, him cheeky fella, missus, he going swimming, don't want to go Sunday school, he bad boy. Sister says, all right, Billy, but we don't hit people to make them do God's will. Okay, so Billy is taking this role of representing the white man, but Sister Eileen is saying, no, we don't do that. Yes? And remember those words that were used earlier about Billy? Black crow, black crow. Okay. But then Sister says, that's enough, David. In one way, it's your own fault. If you'd been at school, it wouldn't have happened. Remember that. Okay. So now Sister gets to the part in the story where King Herod, so this is a story from the Bible, okay? So King Herod actually ordered the soldiers to kill the babies. They wanted to kill Jesus. They were afraid of Jesus growing up and becoming a future king. So they actually ordered all of the babies under 2 years old to be killed. Right? Now I see an interesting connection here between being scared of these Aboriginal children growing up and the action that Mr. Neil ordered to kill the baby. Do you remember? It was not in the play. It was, Mary was talking about her friend. And you'll see it later. Her friend's name is Lillian maybe. But there's this comparison here. I've written here. There's a comparison between the Bible story of the babies being killed by King Herod and the Aboriginal children, like Mary's friend's baby. Remember there was the baby that was buried in the pine plantation? Okay, her friend got pregnant and had a baby after she worked in the in the hospital, and then the baby got killed and put in the pine plantation. So there's the comparison there. Whether or not that was intentional from Davis, but Jack Davis could have used any Bible story, but this Bible story, one about killing babies, even if the comparison is only killing the baby's spirit, it's an interesting choice of story to include. And one interpretation could be that there is this comparison between the Bible story of killing babies and the Aboriginal children's babies who have been killed or taken away because they're afraid of what will happen once they grow up. Does that make sense? Questions? Would you like me to continue? Yeah? Run, do you have a question there? Just wait a little bit. Okay, there you go. No, that's all right. Rain, question? Good? Okay. So they're practicing now the hymn that we will be singing. This hymn, word hymn, it's spelled hymn. A hymn is a song we sing to God, a special song that's about God. Okay? And this is the hymn we'll be singing for Mr. Neville on Australia Day. It's interesting that this hymn, there is a happy land far, far away, where there are saints standing. Now, some people might interpret this as being about heaven, a happy land far away. Others may interpret it, maybe it's about England. Okay, it's far, far away from Australia. But it might also refer to the homeland for the Aboriginal people, or the idea that happiness is a long way away. Okay, it could symbolise many things. Happiness is not here. It's far away. But I just highlighted the first two lines of that song. I didn't worry so much about anything else. Can I continue? Okay. And now we move on to scene 2. Scene 2, Mary is very pregnant. Okay, and she is returning to Moore River. Matron says, just remember, that girl is pregnant and unwell. There is a threat there. Don't touch her. Mr. Neil says, don't worry, I won't touch her. Okay. Now, Mr. Neil says to Mary, Duggaroo, you got caught, hey, and you got yourself pregnant. Well, you'll be all right here. You can stay in the nurse's quarters. Okay? And Mary's like, no, I want to stay with Joe's mum and dad. You can, Mr. Neil, you're pregnant, you're sick, you can stay in the nurse's quarters. Do some light work in the hospital. That's why Mary ran away in the first place, wasn't it? Mary says, I don't want to work in the hospital. You'll work where I think it's fit. You'll do what I tell you. Mary says, I'm not going to work in the hospital. You'll do as I say, you understand? No. So Mary is also showing this spirit, rebellion, not submissive. Okay? And he takes the cat of nine tails. You remember that that's the whip with many, but the many-tailed whip. Okay, and Mary says, I don't care, you can belt me. You can hit me if you like, but I'm not working in the hospital. Billy says, boss is talking to you. Boss is talking to you. He says, F yous. Okay, now Billy now holds her down. So Billy forces her to not move. And Mr. Neil whips her with the whip. So Billy forces her to sit down. Now, I think this is really hard because Billy is her tribe mate, from her own tribe, from her own people. But he is siding with the white man to protect his position and allowing her to be beaten. He's not beating, but he is holding her so she cannot move, so she is beaten. Right? And I just think I've emphasised there, beating a pregnant lady, very pregnant. All right? That's, one of the worst things you can imagine. A society that should honour and protect and look after, particularly women who have a baby inside. Scene 3. Mary sits painfully, but she's back with Joe's family, so in a sense. Yeah? And straight away, we know that Mary's in pain, so Gran gets some leaves for medicine. Again, that traditional knowledge of the land, of what plants have medicine in them. And Gran says, put this on your back. It'll fix you up quick and make you better. Right? She's got the medicine. Is the baby all right? Yeah, he's all right. Mary is terrified of going to hospital. Not going to hospital. Mary will have to get the baby. Mary says, no, I'm having it here. And Gran says, you can have it here. I brought Joe into this world and I'll bring his baby. So Gran's saying, yeah, I can bring in the baby to the world. Before white people came to Australia, that's how Aboriginal people would always have done it. Okay? Just a little aside, something not really connected, but now there's a letter from Joe, okay, and Joe was in prison writing a letter. So Mary says, a letter from Brother Joe. David says, Willie Knapp, give it to me. He just came back from jail, and Joe, give it to him. And interesting here that CC corrects the English. Gave it to him, not give. Past tense. Okay? I've made a little note. CC's becoming more educated. She's younger, so she can learn English. Now I don't know if this is just me, but I saw, when I saw this, that if she stays a long time with white people, maybe she will become assimilated like Topsy. Just her learning English and correcting the English, there was this feeling that when I saw this, that I thought perhaps this is something that Davis is trying to suggest. Okay? It might be hard to argue that, but that's a feeling that I got when I read this scene. I thought, wow, Cece's learning English, she's correcting her brother's English. Will she? My question is, would she assimilate with enough time? Because her education has been, her family have been looking after her. Now she's in this camp with the white people. Will she adjust? It's a question. We never get the answer because it ends. But there is a question there. Okay? Now, we read Joe's letter, and he says, how are you? How's my brother and sister? How are you and the baby? I want to get married when we get out. And this is really interesting here. he says, he's in prison, he's in jail. And he says, it's not too bad here. The food is not bad, better than the settlement. We get real tobacco. Okay? So jail has even better food and conditions than the settlement. To me, that shows me the settlement must be awful, worse than jail. So it highlights that the conditions in the settlement are so bad, they're even worse than the prison. Scene 4. Okay, this is the scene where Sister Eileen talks to Mr. Neil and tries to get the library to happen. We remember that they're talking about the ceremony and there is a happy land. Yeah. And Mr. Neil says, I believe you've been lending books, novels to the... Yes, I have. Mr. It's sort of an unofficial directive. It means like an unspoken law or rule, instruction. It's not encouraged. And Sister is like, what? What do you mean? That you don't encourage the natives to read? But why? She's incredulous. Look at this stage direction. Incredulous. This means really cannot believe it. Like, what? But why? Okay? Incredulous. Look up the word, but it has the feeling of disbelief. But not only disbelief and surprise. Strong surprise. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? And she was going to start a library. It wouldn't even cost anything. I was going to get the books donated for free. And here is that big quote where Mr. Neville says, after my experience in South Africa with the... Now, you people were treated in South Africa. Do you know? We're going to learn because we're actually going to study a movie about this. But they were completely separated from blacks and whites. But he says, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. He says, look, sister, I've got a big mob here, big group, over 700. There's enough troublemakers without giving them ideas. Okay, education, this implication. Education is power. We need to keep them powerless, limit education to keep them powerless. Okay? And this is the unofficial government policy. Okay? Unofficial is important here, but there is an unofficial policy. And now Sister also tries to stand up. She says, you know, well, I have something else to say. It's violated by your policemen to make the students come to my religious education Sunday school classes. Mr. Neil says, if it wasn't compulsory, nobody would come. Sister says, I'd prefer that they come of their own free will. I want them to come because they want to. Mr. Neil says, all right, if you don't like it here, I can send you somewhere else. He's threatening her. She goes to leave and she says, getting back to the books, what do you classify the Bible as? Isn't the Bible a book? Don't we say that they should read the Bible? There's this little attitude of defiance against Mr. Neil. Defiance, do you remember what that meant? A little bit like rebellion, standing up against. And I said a little attitude because I don't think she is directly defiant, but she is still finding a way to express her opinion. All right. Can I continue? Scene 5 is Australia Day. Remember that for Aboriginal people this day might be classed as Invasion Day because it's the day that white people landed in Australia and therefore the day that they started to lose their land. But still, we celebrate it even today. The 26th of January is considered Australia Day. Okay? And even Sister, with all of her compassion, and she is compassionate, and Mr. Davis really does show her as compassionate. Okay? So Jake Davis is not presenting all white people as evil and uncaring. He shows that certain figures certainly were caring. But she also talks about the birth of this wonderful young country. That even people with a caring attitude are somehow ignorant of the fact that Australia Day would be not necessarily the birth of this country. Does that make sense? Because if you consider Australia Day the birth of this country, you do not recognise that Aboriginal people were part of this country long before we ever came here. Does that make sense? Do you need me to say that again? Okay. Australia Day is the day that white people came here. And when you say that was the start of our country, you are saying there was nothing before us. The country didn't exist before us. So by saying the birth of this country, we're celebrating the birth of this country, you're basically saying before Australia Day, before white people, there was no country. You're saying that the Aboriginal society didn't exist. It wasn't a country. You're not part of our country. Okay? There's a lot of implication and suggestion there just in that one line. Does that make sense? Okay. So he's talking about, it's a religious ceremony where, we're giving thanks to our God, to our king, to our country. Right, and Mr. Neville reinforces it, the birth of this nation 146 years ago. And in some ways, this scene might be seen as max of the most important part of the story. It's not quite the ending, it's close to the end. But Jimmy starts to argue during Mr. Neville's speech at Australia Day. Okay? So, Mr. Neville is saying, you Aboriginal people in this small corner here are so fortunate. You're lucky because you get enough food and shelter. And Jimmy says, yeah, weevily flour. Now that's flour with insects in it. There's special insects that live in flour. I once had them in my house, and you can't use the flour anymore because there's just insects throughout the whole thing. They're called weevils. Okay? Jimmy's like, yeah, weevily flour that's useless. Mr. Neville says, and be with family and friends. And you might wonder why you're here. And now Jimmy, a little louder. He's getting more confident. Too bloody right. Sam says, shh, shut up. Mr. Neville says, you are preparing to take your place in Australian society, to live as other Australians live, to live alongside other Australians, to learn to enjoy the privileges and responsibilities of living like a white man, to be treated equally, not worse, not better, under the law. Okay. Now there's a strong irony here because clearly Aboriginal people, you might say they're treated equally, but the play shows that they're not. You might also show that they might say they live alongside the same as, they have the same opportunities, but they tend to become servants, not masters but the servants. The status is different, okay? And because of that, because of this irony, it must be seen as insulting. Jimmy says he's talking out of his bottom. Now we're going to sing the hymn. And they start to sing, and the Aborigines start singing their own words. At the top of page 93, there is a happy land, far no sugar, bread and butter we never see. That's why we're gradually fading away. Fading away means disappearing. Okay? So little by little we are disappearing. We're fading away. And I see this as a stand of defiance from the Aboriginal community. You may make us come here and be part of this ceremony, but we're going to sing and show our opinions. And Mr. Neville tries to stop them, but the Aborigines repeat it even louder. And he says, I'm appalled by this disgraceful demonstration of ingratitude. You're so ungrateful. You're not thankful. You're not thankful. You're ungrateful. I can tell you, you will live to rue, which means regret. You will regret this day. There will be no privileges from now on. Do you know what privileges mean? Privileges are like special things that you get. And I'm pretty sure the Aboriginal people might be there saying, yeah, what privileges, what special things do we have now? Conditions are bad. And Jimmy now calls out. So he's not just muttering, he's getting louder. Now he's calling out what special things, what privileges. Rotten spuds, that's potatoes, rotten onions. Mr. Neville says there'll be no Christmas. Christmas is cancelled. What, a dried up orange and pudding? Remember when they talked about the apples that were rotten? Or the... Well, is it? Who is troublemaker? You're a ringleader. A ringleader is somebody that's the leader that everybody listens to. Okay? He can lead the other Aboriginal people. You're a troublemaker and you're a leader, so you will gather everybody else to be troublemakers. Jimmy says, no, you listen to me. And he approaches Mr. Neville. Approach means gets closer. So he starts to get closer to Mr. Neville. So this confrontation coming face to face between Mr. Neville and Jimmy is like the climax of this action. Finally, Jimmy gets a chance to express his opinion. He says, no, you listen to me, Mr. A.O. That's his initials, Mr. A.O. Neville. So now he's calling him by his first name. A.O., you come and eat supper with us tonight. How about you try and eat our meal? Bread and dripping and black tea, are you going to try it? You say there's all these privileges. Why don't you try eating what we eat? You try living in our situation. Okay? That's why I've said here the climax of the play, this confronting. Confront. Front. You know what front means? Front is like the front. That's why confront means face to face. Yeah? So this is a confrontation. A confrontation between Jimmy and Mr. Neville. Now he continues. Nothing to do with bloody scabies. And that's what here the white the Wagellas would vote. Yeah? So he could have a nice white little town. A nice white little effing town. Okay? And now Jimmy is shouting. But he's standing alone. The others have moved away. Maybe they're scared. Oh, if we stand there, we'll get in trouble too. Now, Jimmy runs out of breath, he holds his chest, and he falls to the ground. Okay? This is the moment where he has a heart attack and he dies. Okay? So, that's partly why this is a climax, because he is confronted Mr. Neville. He's gotten angry, and then, because of his heart condition, he's died. Okay? And then they sing God Save the King. Mr. Neil to the white people says, oh, he's only fainted. He's just gone to sleep. But Matron says, he's got a heart condition. Come on, we've got to help him. Now we find out that he's died in scene 6. But not straight away. Mr. Neil and Matron are talking. And here, on page 95, Sam comes in and says, we want to know if it where I knew I've died. There's a joke. Where? From prison. Yeah? Can we get Joe out of prison for the funeral? Who? Joe Millimura. Impossible. Why? Other Aborigines, other Nyungas get out when the relations die. You could ring up Mr. Neville and ask him, too late, the funeral's tomorrow. Alright? So they're not even going to allow him to come out of prison for the funeral. Millie says, you could if you wanted to. Oh, don't get upset, there's nothing we can do. And don't you go wrapping him up in a government blanket. You put him in a coffin. So a wooden box, not just like material blanket, but a proper box, a proper burial. Okay? I like this bit here. Sam says, will you ring the prison and tell Joe? Mr. Neil says, you're a member of the family, you can write to him yourself. Millie says, you're scared to tell him. You're scared to tell him. Okay? You're scared what he will do. You're scared to tell him. You're scared of what he'll do when he gets out. You're scared, you're scared. You're scared of Joe. Now I see this as like a statement, young Joe growing up to take Jimmy's place as the one who will defy, go against the authority. Because remember earlier on we saw Jimmy as the one that the authority figures were afraid of, because he was clever, but he also was not afraid of saying his, speaking out, speaking up against this, oppression or suppression. Neil says, oh, this is a case, emotion comes in through the door and logic disappears. So Mr. Neil's saying, oh, they're so emotional they can't think logically. But Matron says, I agree. It's in this office that it happens. Her implication is, you're exactly the same. You've got emotion and your logic goes out the window. Your logic disappears. Scene 7, Mary's having her baby and she's terrified. She's saying, don't let them take baby, don't let them take baby. It can be a reference to the stolen generation. Generation is, you saw rabbit-proof fence, okay, but also a reference to her friend whose baby was killed. Okay, Gran says nobody's going to take baby, don't you worry. All right. Now, when the baby is born, she gets ashes. Gran gets ashes. Do you all know what ashes are? Now, ashes from a fire. Okay, she gets some ashes from a fire. This is what ash is, to put on the baby. Now, what this is, so they get the ashes, and she says, now cover the baby in ashes. Okay? Core, belly, now cover more better than John. Image. And it looks like this. Okay? When a baby is born, we use this baby powder, right? But traditionally, in the Aboriginal community, they wouldn't have had baby powder, so they use ashes for the same purpose. More better is ashes than Johnson's baby powder. All right? So they have a way. They have these things in their life. They don't need the white way. It's the impression. Mary's terrified when matron comes. Don't let matron see baby. Hide him, hide him. Don't let matron take him away. Mary's terrified of matron taking her baby. Matron's like, I just want to check him. I only want to help. Mary says, don't take him to the hospital. The trackers will get him and kill him. And she's like, what are you talking about? Bury him in the pine plantation. Like Lillian's baby. Mr. Neil, tell him to do it, to kill baby. Okay. Matron says, here's clean cotton wool, baby powder. Gran says, don't need powder, I'll use my own. I've got ashes. All right. Now a baby, as Joe returns, scene 8 is Joe's return. Joe comes back. Now we've got a baby who's sleeping in a kerosene tin. Kerosene is a type of petrol. So if we do an image search, kerosene tin, okay, a tin like this, so the baby's sleeping in a tin. And Joe comes back. He's got a bag. And David says, points at the kerosene tin, your baby in there. Oh, wow. Come see baby. Sit up. Weeks old. What'd you call him? Buddy, Nyunga name, magpie. We waited. Wajala name. Joe says, I want to call him Jimmy. The idea is we're passing on that name because we want to pass on that future, that identity. And after he gets out of prison, he's able to give his family gifts. He has tobacco for Gran. He has, for his sister Cece, ribbons for the hair. For David, he's got a knife. For Mum, he's got needle and cotton. He's got tobacco. For his wife, Mary, he's got a red dress. He worked in prison and was given real money for his work. It was enough to buy gifts for his family. The implication is, in this settlement, they're slaves. Even in prison, he can work and make enough money to buy gifts for his family. The conditions are better. It's really reinforcing that the conditions are better than, in the prison, they're better than the settlement. Yeah? Where did you get the money? Says Sam. Wages. Yeah? I earned a few bob, and they gave it to me when I got out. Not like this place. He's making a contract. His contract says, Nilamura will not undertake not to domicile, which means live, in the town of Northam, nor anyone anywhere in Northamptonshire, I fully understand if I return to Northam, I am liable to be returned under warrant to the Moore River or other government native settlement. My point is, can you understand that? Look at all the big words: domicile, liable, under warrant, undertake. They use legal language which disempowers, takes away the power of the Aboriginal person to even understand it. Okay, so this legal language disempowers Aboriginal people with English as their second language. And I'm going to stop there because I think the bell has just gone. And we have like 1.5 pages to go that we'll do at the start of next lesson. And then the rest of the lesson we will be spending on preparing for your essay.